last video, I dealt with the guilt that sometimes we deal with after losing a loved one, and mostly focused on the guilt we may feel like we didn't do enough, like we did something wrong, we should have prevented it somehow. And that's something that I believe many times you may experience with a situation. Then today I want to kind of go into a different avenue of guilt that you may feel of, what if I didn't have enough faith? I do believe, I believe, I've grown up believing this. I believe our God still heals, that he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I read in the Word of God where he heals over and over again. I even read where he raises the dead. And yes, I believe God can do that as well. And I believe we serve a miraculous God. And I believe that many times, our faith impacts that. If we don't believe, then we're likely not going to receive. And so, but unfortunately, we have in our church world today a lot of different beliefs on faith, on healing, on those miracles, and it goes from one extreme to another extreme. You have the extreme where they don't believe in that, and then you have the extreme where they believe that if you don't receive, then it's your fault because you didn't have enough faith, and that if you have the right faith, you're going to receive your answer. But I'm more of a in the middle person on that. I believe God does heal. I do believe in his miracles. I believe in the raising of the dead. But I also know and believe that that sometimes it doesn't matter how great your faith is, that the answer is no. That you don't get what you sought. You don't get what you desired, what your heart longed for. And but sometimes Satan will show up and say, well, maybe your faith wasn't enough. Maybe you didn't have enough faith. Just to kind of back up and just, say, I will be the first to say, I don't know my faith. I mean, I pray I have enough faith, or I prayed that I did have enough faith. I felt like I had enough faith. I believed Scott was going to be healed. I believed he was going to come home. I believed. I even believed God was going to raise him from the dead. And that may surprise some of my friends because I really didn't talk to a lot of people about it. But me and my kids, we prayed about it every day. And yes, each time I had the opportunity just to kind of share a little story. The mortuary where his body was across the street from our church. And so each day that I had to go to the church, I would literally walk up the sidewalk staring at the mortuary, just praying that he was going to come walking out, praying that he was going to come. I believed. And then again, I also, all the time say, Lord, I don't know really what's in my heart, like and if there's any unbelief there, I pray that you will remove it. I pray that you will help me to believe. But as well as I know my heart, I believed that he was going to make it through that sickness. I believed even after he didn't make it through the sickness that God was going to bring him back to me. But then I always say this, but even if you doubt whether I had enough faith, I can't imagine you saying that my 5 kids didn't have enough faith either. Because there's nothing to me that's more precious than childlike faith. And my 5 children were believing he was coming home. I remember the day that his heart first stopped beating. And I came home and actually we had, and I don't know if I've even told this whole story, but maybe I will sometime. But his heart had stopped beating. The hospital had called me. I rushed in, and it took them a while, but they finally got his heart back. They had him on a machine to keep him alive. And they had to transport him to another hospital that was better able to deal with the situation. He was unconscious for the next week as they were working on him, and then they were thinking they were going to wake him up, but instead he passed away. And when I came home that first night after his heart had stopped, the first night when he first was unconscious and transported to the other hospital, I came home to my kids, and they were praying and they were believing God, and they were telling me God's going to bring them through. God's going to bring. There was no doubt in our home as far as I could see. There was faith. There was faith. The day that he actually did pass away, the day they were supposed to wake him up, I had packed my clothes to go stay in the hospital that night so that I wouldn't have to come home, because I was having to travel back and forth to another town to see him each day. And I had packed my bags to be able to stay. And there was never a thought there that he wasn't going to wake up. And so when people say, well, if you have enough faith, I don't know how much more faith we could have had. I don't know. I mean, again, I can't say, oh, well, we had great faith. But as well as I knew our hearts, as well as I could see with my kids, we were believing God was going to bring them home. And so, but nonetheless, as much as we were believing that, sometimes Satan will show up and he will say, maybe you didn't believe enough. Maybe you weren't praying enough. Maybe your faith wasn't in the right thing. You preach, have your faith in Jesus Christ, but maybe your faith wasn't exactly where it should have been. But then I stop and I remind myself that I don't think God is sitting up in heaven and saying, well, she didn't cross her T's just right or dot her I's just right. But instead, he's just looking for faith. And so for whatever reason, despite the faith that I had, despite the faith that my kids had, despite the faith of the people who were all over the world praying for my husband, because yes, as a minister of the gospel, he had friends all over the world who were praying for him. But despite all of that, God chose to take him home. And so, but yeah, Satan will show up and he'll say, well, you just didn't have enough faith. You just didn't have enough faith. It was your fault. Again, Satan is so quick to try to bring guilt and pain, to make what is already hurting hurt even more by making you feel like you failed somehow. But I want to encourage you, and again, just as I said in the last video, I can't explain why it happened. I can't explain why God didn't answer your prayer the way you had hoped he would. But it's just, we just have to trust him. We just have to trust him. And I know that's so difficult. I get it's so difficult. I live this. It is difficult. But I also know God is faithful. And though even in my own life, I still don't have any understanding of why this has happened, but I'm standing upon his word. I'm trusting him each day. I'm watching him carry me through each day. I'm watching him carry my kids through each day, and I'm just trusting him. And one day I will be reunited with my husband, and I just have to trust God with why this happened the way it has. And I want to encourage you, trust God, and don't be discouraged. I know it's hard, but God's faithful.